So I have been bombarded with questions about the seismic changes to the real estate industry that will turn the industry upside down and lower the cost of buying and selling a home. And there's a lot to digest here because these are splashy clickbait headlines that are a bit hyperbolic, and in some cases they're simply misleading or not even accurate. Now, yes, there are some changes that will affect how real estate transactions are done in some states and with some brokers more than others, but there's one thing and one thing only that ultimately steers home prices: supply and demand. It's no different than any other commodity. I mean, yes, things like interest rates have some effect, but really not as much as people think. Like last year when rates were in the high sevens, home prices continued to rise because there were still more buyers than sellers. And yes, the rates took some buyers out of the market, but really not enough to affect home prices significantly. And sellers are simply not going to start lowering their asking prices because of these new rules. That's not happening. All right, so what are these rules? Well, there are a lot of elements to unpack, so try to hang with me. Now, first, like I said, it's important to understand that real estate transactions are conducted differently in every state. So many of these changes have a greater effect in some places than others. And if you buy a home in, say, New York, it's a completely different process than buying or selling in Georgia. And I'm not an expert in how these new changes will affect people outside of Georgia, so let's stick with Georgia. Okay, I'm an agent with Keller Williams. And with our brokerage and many others, sellers have always been able to negotiate the commission with their agent. Now, I provide my clients with comprehensive and extensive services, and my commission is based on that. Now, historically, when a seller pays the listing agent, that agent and the seller in turn then determine how much of that commission will be shared with the buyer's agent. But for practical purposes, yes, it is still the seller who has effectively paid the buyer's agent commission. And all of this has always been disclosed. But these new regulations basically separate that, saying the seller will pay their agent X amount, and they will agree to pay a buyer's agent X amount if they want. But the result, for all intents and purposes, is the same. Now, if the seller chooses to not compensate the buyer's agent for bringing them a buyer, that is completely their prerogative. However, here's the reality. The buyer is already spending X amount on the house. They're paying thousands of dollars out of pocket for a down payment, thousands for inspections, appraisals, closing costs. So there will be many buyers who will likely just not be in a position to also spend additional cash on the agent commission. And they may very likely simply tell their agents, hey, please don't show us homes where we'll also need to pay your commission as well because we don't have that kind of extra cash, thereby eliminating potential buyers from seeing that home. And keep in mind, statistically, 89% of all buyers still use an agent because they understand the important value an agent brings when it comes to writing a winning offer, negotiating the terms, navigating a 75-page inspection report, understanding appraisals and all the timeline contingencies. Because, not being adept in these areas could lead to losing your earnest money or purchasing a money pit of a home or, in extreme cases, even getting sued. And again, these are very plausible scenarios. So as a seller, you need to ask yourself if you're willing to potentially eliminate a large number of the buyer pool by not offering a buyer's agent commission. Now, for buyers who are now thinking, fine, I just won't have an agent, think about this. You're going into what can be a complex and expensive financial enterprise, and the seller has hired a professional with years of experience to negotiate against you to get that seller the very best, most advantageous deal. Wouldn't you want to have your best interests represented by someone of similar caliber? Or do you think you've watched $1 Million Listing enough times to be able to understand the entire process and risks on your own? There's a saying that a person who represents him or herself in court has a dummy for a client. Just saying. Now, there are a couple of other elements to this settlement that deal more with how agents communicate commission structure with each other. And I'm happy to go into that with you offline, but what I've tried to cover here is really the crux of the consumer effect. So I hope this shines a little bit of a light on this story. I saw a piece on CNN that was clearly written by someone who did not have a complete understanding of how real estate transactions were conducted, which is why I felt it necessary to make this video. So please, feel free to reach out if you want. You can ask me any other questions about it or discuss anything. I'm at jimmybarron.com. That's Barron with one R. Or you can even call me at 404-234-2033. I am happy to chat.